that is optical passive device, that is dielectric thin film filters. So dielectric thin film filter, it is used in order to extract some specified band of wavelength signals. Okay, that is the working of dielectric thin film filter. It is being used in order to extract some specified wavelength signals. Okay, similar to your fiber Bragg grating, this dielectric thin film filter is also being used in order to extract some specific band of or uh, particularly a narrow wavelength band of signals. Okay, so how do we construct this dielectric thin film filter? So you can see a simple construction diagram here. So here we have used two reflecting mirror surfaces and they are faced opposite to each other. These two reflecting surfaces are uh, going to create a reflection type of a cavity, and that is called as Fabry-Perot cavity. So the cavity that is being created in between the two reflecting surfaces, we name it as Fabry-Perot cavity, and D represents the distance between these two reflecting surfaces. Okay, so the working of this is like the incident input signal is allowed to enter this cavity, Fabry-Perot cavity, from the left side. So you can see on the left side, we have an incident light signal that is entering the cavity. Once this incident light signal enters the cavity, this light signal is made up of, it's a multi-wavelength light signal. Okay, so multi-wavelength light signal is allowed to enter the cavity, and this light signal will undergo multiple reflections inside the cavity. Okay, so after the light undergoes multiple reflections, so because it is made up of a combination of multiple wavelengths, there are certain wavelengths which will satisfy a condition called as resonance condition. Okay, so those wavelengths which are satisfying the resonance condition of the cavity, that is Fabry-Perot cavity, those wavelengths will be exiting out of the cavity. That means to say they are transmitted out of the cavity. So you can see on the right hand side, transmitted resonant waves are all going to add in phase. Okay, so those wavelength signals which are satisfying the resonance condition will come out of the cavity and they will be transmitted out of the dielectric thin film filter. But there are other wavelengths which start reflecting inside the cavity and they will not be allowed to transmit. Instead, they will be reflecting back to the original medium, the medium in which the light signal has entered. Okay, so that is the working principle of dielectric thin film filter. So you have a two reflecting surfaces, they are faced opposite to each other, and the input signal or the incident signal is a combination of multi-wavelength which is allowed to enter the cavity, and the cavity distance is named as D. This D will define what wavelength signals will be transmitted and what wavelength signals will be reflected back. And the cavity name is named as Fabry-Perot cavity. Okay. So D is the parameter. Once you vary this D, then this will become a tunable dielectric thin film filter. So if we can establish certain technique, so that one reflecting surface is fixed and the other reflecting surface, if it is movable, then the D distance D can be varied. So if you vary the distance between the two reflecting surfaces, then different wavelengths can be transmitted and many other wavelengths can be reflected. So that is the working of dielectric thin film filter. So it is similar to your fiber Bragg grating. There we have constructed some uniform or periodic structures in fiber Bragg grating, but here we are using the concept of uh, reflecting cavity or reflections inside the cavity. Okay, and those wavelength signals which satisfy the resonance will come out of the reflection cavity, right? So coming to the application of thin film filters, similarly as we discussed for fiber Bragg grating, that is the multiplexing and demultiplexing concept, even thin film filter can also be used in order to implement your multiplexing concept. So here I'm going to discuss about multiplexing four different wavelength signals using thin film filters. Okay, so in order to multiplex four different wavelength signals, we require at least three thin film filters. Okay, so let me take this first thin film filter. I've named it as TFF2. So this please look into the numbers of the thin film filters which is represented here. TFF2 represents a thin film filter with which will transmit wavelength 2. TFF3 is the thin film filter which will transmit wavelength lambda 3, and TFF4 is the thin film filter which will transmit wavelength lambda 4. Okay, so all other wavelengths will be reflected by those thin film filters, right? So TFF2 you can see on the left hand side, lambda 1 is getting incident on thin film filter 2, but because thin film filter 2 is designed to reflect, transmit only lambda 2, it will reflect all other wavelengths. So lambda 1, which is incident on thin film filter 2, will be reflected. Okay, and you need to position this thin film filters in such a way that the reflected light should be incident on the next thin film filter. So that is the way the arrangement has to be done with respect to this thin film filters. Okay, so lambda 1, which is incident on TFF2, will be reflected, whereas lambda 2, which is incident on the other side of thin film filter 2, will be transmitted. So again, understand these thin film filters are bidirectional devices. They can operate in either direction, right? So lambda 1 will be reflected, lambda 2 will be transmitted. Together, lambda 1, lambda 2 will start incident on the right surface of the thin film filter 3. So TFF3 is designed in such a way that lambda 3 will be transmitted and all other wavelengths will be reflected. So lambda 1, lambda 2, which is incident on the right surface of TFF3, will be reflected. Similarly, lambda 3 will be transmitted. So together we will have a combination of lambda 1, 2 and 3, which is incident again on the third thin film filter, that is TFF4. So TFF4 is tuned to reflect all the wavelengths except lambda 4, where lambda 4 will be transmitted. So lambda 4 will be transmitted, which is incident on the right side of the thin film filter 4, and lambda 1, 2, 3 will be reflected. So at the exit point, so you will be having lambda 1, 2, 3 reflected wavelengths and lambda 4, which is a transmitted wavelength. So combination of lambda 1, 2, 3 and 4. So this is how we can multiplex 4 wavelength signals lambda 1, 2, 3 and 4 using 3 thin film filters. Okay. Yes. Are you all following? Kindly one of you reply.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Have you understood this multiplexing concept using thin film filters?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes. So that's about the concept of dielectric thin film filter. So as I was discussing in the previous session about active optical devices such as tunable optical filters using fiber Bragg grating, then variable optical attenuators, then dynamic gain equalizers, and optical add-drop multiplexers. So these 4 active devices I have discussed in the previous class only. So now in the next topic which I'm going to take up is MEMS, that is micro electromechanical systems. So this is a technology, MEMS is a technology, but this technology can be adopted in order to design our optical passive and active devices. So the technology is being adapted in order to design the optical components. So let me explain the concept of MEMS technology, which is being used in our passive and active optical devices. What are MEMS? MEMS are nothing but the miniature devices. These devices are going to uh, combine some of the properties such as mechanical, electrical, and optical properties. So all these mechanical, electrical, and optical properties are being combined and which are being used in order to design your optical components. And what are the features that MEMS is going to offer? MEMS is going to offer you the sensing and actuation functions. Okay, so MEMS devices which are constructed using MEMS technology are going to offer sensing and actuation functions. Okay, how that sensing and actuation function is implemented, let me discuss a little while. So with respect to how do we fabricate or manufacture these optical devices using MEMS, so they are fabricated using the way in which the integrated circuits are being fabricated. So the same process like batch processing technique is being used in order to fabricate the MEMS based optical devices. Okay, and you can see the range or the size of these devices, they vary from micrometers to millimeters. Okay, how do we control this MEMS device, MEMS optical device constructed using MEMS technology? We can control either through electrical mean, thermal mean, or by magnetic means. So these are the ways of controlling the MEMS based optical devices. And what are the applications of these MEMS based optical devices? These devices are widely being used in airbag deployment systems and in inkjet printer heads and in automobiles and even in the medical applications. Okay, so you can find varieties of applications with respect to the MEMS technology based optical devices that are being used. So you can see here uh, patient activity monitoring and pacemakers. So even in these devices, the MEMS based optical devices are being used. Okay. And coming back to this MEMS technology, which is being adopted to construct our various active and passive devices. So you can see MEMS technology is being adopted for construction of variable optical attenuators, tunable optical filters, tunable laser sources, optical add-drop multiplexers, dynamic gain equalizers, optical switches, cross connects, etc. Okay, so these are some of the active and passive devices which can also be constructed using MEMS technology. So let me now explain the concept of how the MEMS sensing and actuation method is being, or the function is being uh, established. Okay, so consider a silicon material. So that silicon material is acting like a ground plane. On top of the silicon material, we will start growing a dielectric insulator. So these things and all, I think you have studied when you have understood the transistor fabrication steps. Okay, so you have a silicon surface that we call it as substrate, and on top of that we have a dielectric insulator. Okay, so dielectric insulator is being grown on top of your silicon substrate, right? And we also have one more, what we call it as a suspended polysilicon beam. It's a different material compared to your silicon and insulator. Polysilicon is a polycrystalline material which is suspended on top of the dielectric insulator. Okay, so this is the setup which we have considered in order to understand our MEMS sensing and actuation. So you can see the polysilicon beam has a typical length of say 80 micrometer, and the width of the polysilicon beam is 10 micrometer and thickness of 0.5 micrometer. So this will be the dimension of your suspended polysilicon beam. And the gap between the suspended polysilicon and dielectric insulator, one has to maintain zero point 0.6 micrometer. So zero point 0.6 micrometer gap, or the distance has to be maintained between the beam and insulator. So first setup is where we have not applied any voltage between the silicon plane and the suspended polysilicon. So you can see on the left hand side, the voltage applied between the suspended polysilicon beam and the silicon ground plane, it is zero. And the second setup, that is the first setup, we call it as an off position of a switch, MEMS based switch, and the second position is called as on position of a MEMS based switch. So on position is where you apply some voltage greater than zero between the silicon ground plane and polysilicon beam. So when what happens if you apply a voltage between the silicon ground plane and polysilicon beam, the electric force between the silicon ground plane and the polysilicon beam, it will pull down the beam and it will make a contact with respect to dielectric insulator. So you can see temporarily the suspended beam changes its shape slightly, and it starts making a physical contact with the dielectric insulator. So this is what we call it as on position of a MEMS based switch. Okay. So this happens only if you apply a voltage greater than zero between the ground plane and the suspended polysilicon. So polysilicon will undergo some mechanical changes because of the electric force, or the electric force that is applied between the ground plane and your suspended beam. So it undergoes some mechanical changes temporarily. That mechanical changes will make the suspended beam to be in contact with the dielectric insulator for temporary time. Okay, so this is a simple concept of how MEMS based devices can be constructed. Okay, this is a simple switch operation. So the same method can be extended to construct all our optical passive and active devices. So So to extend with the discussion, so if the material that is being used is a stiff material, you need that means to say the suspended polysilicon beam, the material which is used, if it is a stiff material, you need to apply high voltages between the ground plane and the suspended beam in order to achieve that mechanical deflection. Okay, so more and more a voltage has to be applied if the material for a silicon ground plane as well as for the beam, polysilicon beam, are of stiff material, okay, in order to achieve this mechanical deflection, right? But if you can have a material for a polysilicon beam as well as suspended polysilicon beam as well as this silicon ground plane, you can reduce this voltage, the voltage that you apply between the beam and the ground plane, if the material is highly compliant in nature. So highly compliant polymeric materials are being used instead of the stiff material. So one can apply a less voltage between the plane and the beam so that the same mechanical deflection can be achieved with a less voltage. So those devices are called as compliant MEMS, CMEMS. In short form, we call it as CMEMS. CMEMS means compliant MEMS, where the materials for your suspended beam and the ground plane are of highly compliant polymeric materials. They are made up of highly compliant polymeric materials. Okay, so they require less voltages to achieve the same mechanical deflection as that of uh, the stiff material which is being used, right? So that's about MEMS, the concept of MEMS, MEMS technology, applications of MEMS in commercial applications as well as in construction of optical passive and active devices, right? Okay. So I'll straight away move on to the next active device where I need to discuss about dynamic gain equalizer. Sorry, I think I've discussed dynamic gain equalizer. Uh, need to take the next active device, that is chromatic dispersion compensators. Okay. Yes, can any one of you just state what is dispersion? Those who are online, one of you can define what is dispersion. I think we have discussed enough about dispersion in second module. One of you define what is dispersion.
Spreading out of light when it travels further, sir.
Sorry.
Spreading out of light, the property of light which where it spreads.
Ah, ah, ah. Okay. Spreading of light pulse as it propagates along the length of the fiber, right? So if you allow a digital pulse to transmit inside the optical fiber, as the pulse starts propagating inside the fiber, because of the material properties that is exhibited by the optical fiber, the same digital pulse will start spreading. That means to say it starts extending its pulse width, and as the distance increases, the pulse width will also increase. Correct? So that is what we had discussed with respect to dispersion, right? So you just go through the title here. It says chromatic dispersion compensators, right? So chromatic dispersion means, so we had two classification of dispersion. One is chromatic dispersion, or it is also called as intramodal dispersion, and the other one is intermodal dispersion, right? So here we are going to understand and construct a device which is called as chromatic dispersion compensator, right? So whenever a digital pulse undergoes chromatic dispersion, again chromatic dispersion is classified as material and wavelengths. I'm not going to go in detail of those material dispersion and wavelength dispersion. So chromatic dispersion is also called as intramodal dispersion, where the dispersion occurs if there is a signal or the energy exchange that is happening between the modes in a single mode fiber. Okay, intramodal dispersion. So within a mode. So if there is an energy exchange that happens, electric field or an energy exchange which happens within a mode, right? between the spectral components within a mode, right? So how do we compensate the effect of effect of this chromatic dispersion? So we need to design an active device called as CDC, that is chromatic dispersion compensator, which will overcome the effect or which will create an effect which is opposite to that of the chromatic dispersion, so that the pulse broadening can be reduced, right? So that is what CDC is going to do, right? So a critical factor in optical links which are operating above 2.5 Gbps. So this is applicable only for those speeds which are 2.5 Gbps and above. Okay, so in such cases, the optical links which are offering 2.5 Gbps and above, we need to have some compensating effect in order to reduce the pulse broadening. Okay, so compensating for the chromatic dispersion effects will lead us to reduce the pulse broadening, thereby reducing the bit error rates. So if the pulse gets broadened, the bit error rate will increase. So our intention here is to design such a device which will reduce the pulse broadening, thereby reducing the bit error rates. Once the bit error rates are reduced, the bandwidth will be increased, right? One method of achieving this dynamic chromatic dispersion compensating is through use of a chirped fiber Bragg grating. So please concentrate on this word or the term chirped fiber Bragg grating. So I think you all have understood what is fiber Bragg grating. Fiber Bragg grating is a device which is being constructed using a uniform or a periodic structure inside the fiber, and that uniform structure will accept only which will start reflecting such wavelengths which are satisfying the grating condition, and it will reflect all other wavelengths, right? Here additional term is being inserted called as chirped fiber Bragg grating. So this chirped stands for uh, a structure which is being created again inside the optical fiber, but the dimension of the structure is not uniform. Instead, it starts reducing as the distance increases. So please concentrate on this diagram here. Okay, this is a section of the fiber or the fiber length. You can see these are the grating structures which are being formed inside the fiber. So the dimensions we can observe, the first structure is having a big dimension. As you start moving towards right, the structures are going to reduce in their dimension. So that is the meaning of chirped grating. Uniform grating means all the whatever the structures that you have for certain length will have a same or uniform dimension. That is what we call it as static grating or a uniform grating, right? But here chipped fiber grating indicates these structures are not same in size, or they are not uniform in size. The size will reduce as the length increases towards the left to right. Okay, so this will have a bigger dimension. The second one will have a little smaller dimension, and the spacing is also varying as you move towards right from the left. The spacing as well as the dimension of the grating structures will start reducing. Okay, but here in the diagram it is not exactly as I explained. But please keep it in mind the dimension of the spacing, as the dimension of the structure as well as the spacing between the two structures will start reducing as you propagate from right to left. Okay, so please concentrate here. So you have a widened pulse. So widened pulse indicates it's a pulse which has propagated for certain length of the fiber and it has undergone pulse broadening. Okay, so this widened pulse is start incident on a chirped fiber Bragg grating. Okay, here this pulse is allowed to pass inside the chirped fiber grating, where the grating decreasing grating spacing as well as the structures are being maintained here, right? So what happens as this widened pulse is made up of multi-wavelength component. So this widened pulse is nothing but it's a contribution of multiple wavelengths. So multiple wavelength has contributed to a pulse. Multiple wavelength is going to contribute to a pulse, and that pulse has broadened or widened because it has propagated because it is propagated for a certain length of the fiber, right? You can see wavelengths that satisfy the Bragg condition, fiber Bragg condition. Obviously, they will start reflecting because we are studying here the reflecting kind of a fiber Bragg grating. So any wavelength that satisfy the grating condition will start reflecting back, right? And those wavelengths which will not satisfy the grating condition will start propagating, or which will start transmitting out of the fiber grating, right? Because this incident beam or a pulse, incident pulse is made up of multi wavelength. You can see here, uh, lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3, or there are different wavelengths, right? So here, this lambda, which is satisfying the grating condition, after it passes through only the second grating structure. Okay, once this, please concentrate on here in this diagram, this wavelength, once it passes two grating structures, it will start reflecting because that particular wavelength is satisfying the grating condition at the second grating structure itself. Okay, that is the reason why it starts reflecting, right? And all other wavelengths will be passed on. So all other wavelengths will start uh, uh, propagating inside the grating structure, that is chip fiber grating. And you can see second wavelength signal is satisfying the grating condition at this point where it has crossed almost 5 grating structures. So this wavelength, second wavelength, will start getting reflected at a distance which is greater than the distance in which the first wavelength is being reflected. Okay, so this second wavelength has traveled so much of distance, right? Just a minute. The second wavelength has traveled so much distance before it starts reflecting, correct? Before it starts reflecting, it has traveled so much of distance, right? Next, you consider a third wavelength, and we assume that this incident pulse, widened pulse, is a contribution of only 3 wavelengths. First wavelength will it has reflected at the end of the second grating itself, whereas the second wavelength has reflected at the end of fifth grating, and the third wavelength will start reflecting at the end of almost all the grating structures, right? But the third wavelength has traveled so much distance. Second wavelength has traveled this distance, third wavelength has traveled this distance, whereas the first wavelength has traveled only this distance, right? So first wavelength has traveled only small distance and it has been reflected. Second wavelength has traveled half a distance inside the grating and it has been reflected. Okay. The third wavelength, which has traveled almost all the entire distance, which has covered all the grating structure, and it has started reflecting because because the third wavelength has satisfied the grating condition only at that point inside the grating structure. So what happens here is multiple wavelength signals are reflected at different time duration at different distances. So once they start reflecting, they will arrive at the point in which the incident beam is being reflected. At this point, all the wavelength signals are arriving at different time instances because all these wavelengths have traveled different distances. So a simple equation is like speed is equal to distance by time, or time is equal to the distance by distance into speed, right? So all wavelength signals which are reflected at different distances will start arriving at the input or the incident point at different time instances, right? So because they are arriving at different time instances, the pulse which has broadened at the incident point, the pulse which has broadened at the incident point before it is going inside the grating, will reassume its shape of this form, what we call it as a compressed pulse. Okay, so this widened pulse, which has undergone pulse broadening, the effect of that is being compensated by reflecting multiple wavelength signals at different distances. Okay, that compensating effect is such a way that the compressed pulse is the result of reflection of wavelengths at different distances. Okay, So this is the concept of chipped fiber Bragg grating. So the word chipped indicates the grating structures are not uniform and the spacing between the structures are not uniform, as we saw in case of fiber Bragg grating. That is a conventional fiber Bragg grating. Okay. So the concept is, it is very simple and clear. Widened pulse, which is a contribution of three wavelength signals, which has undergone pulse broadening, start incident on the input side of the chip fiber grating structure, and individual wavelength signals are started reflecting at different distances in inside the grating structure. As they start reflecting at different distances, they will arrive at the input side at different time instances. So the the amount of pulse that has been broadened because of the dispersion is being compensated by reflecting the wavelengths at different distances, so that they will arrive at different time instances at the input point itself, and the result of which is a compressed pulse like this. Okay, so what is the achievement that is being done using the chromatic dispersion compensator? A broadened pulse, you can see here, a broadened pulse of this much of duration is being compressed to this time duration. This is the amount of pulse width after the pulse that exits out of the dispersion compensator. Okay, so the effect of dispersion, particularly the effect of chromatic dispersion, is being compensated by using this non-uniform grating structure, what we call it as chipped fiber grating, fiber Bragg grating. That clear? The working of chipped fiber Bragg grating, that is dispersion, chromatic dispersion compensator. Yes. Sai Krishna, have you followed this? Sai
Yes,
Krishna,
sir. Yes, sir.
have you understood the difference between the conventional grating and this chipped fiber grating?
Yes, sir. It decreases continuously.
I mean, the structure or the grating structure will start reducing in its size, and the spacing between the structure will also start reducing as
Yes, sir.
it propagates from left towards the right inside the
Yes,
fluid.
sir.
Okay. And to fabricate such a device, it's highly complicated because these are all of micrometer size. These, whatever the grating structure that we have seen, because the fiber itself is in micrometer, the fiber size itself is in micrometer, and these structures that has to be created or fabricated, which are what we call it as active devices. Inside the active device, if we start constructing such non-uniform structure, it's a highly complicated process, but still it is being achieved so that an effect of chromatic dispersion is being compensated here, right? So that's about chromatic dispersion compensator. So let me move on to the next active device, that is tunable light sources. So tunable light sources, in the sense, uh, there are only two light sources with respect to your optical communication. One is a LED source, which is not being used in such links where precise output is being expected. So LED source is only for experimental purpose. Most of the optical link will use highly coherent light source called as laser source. Okay. So how do we construction of the laser source is being will be discussed in module 3. It's a separate module where we will be understanding the structure, that is fabrication structure of these laser sources and LED sources, similar to your integrated transistors. The way the integrated circuit transistor is being fabricated, the same method is being adopted in order to construct your uh, light sources. That is different. Here we are going to understand how the optical sources are being used, and how the optical sources, especially the laser source, can be tuned. How do we achieve this tunable property with respect to your laser source or a light source? So that is what it is being discussed here. And this laser source is very important with respect to your WDM network, especially dense WDM network, right? Because in dense WDM network, as you have seen, it requires, there are more number of channels that are being packed inside the dense WDM network, and the spacing between the channels are also very small. So in that case, we require a highly coherent light which should be coming out of the laser source in terms of the spectral width, say zero point 0.8 to zero point 0.5 nanometer. So that must be the spectral width of the output of the laser source. So in that case, if that is the output that is coming out of the laser source, so how do we achieve the tunable property with respect to that static laser source? So if we want to use a light source for a dense WDM network, especially dense wavelength division multiplex network, so we need to have uh, a laser source which is highly coherent in terms of its spectral width, zero point 0.8 to in the range of zero point 0.5 to zero point 0.8 nanometers, and we need to have additional features into that laser source such that it should be temperature controlled and it should be uh, wavelength controlled. Okay, those are the condition because uh, if you cannot control the temperature of the laser source over a period of time, the output that can come out of the laser source may not be highly coherent. So in that case, the cost of that highly coherent light source is very expensive compared to a less coherent light source. In addition, the laser sources must be carefully controlled in terms of its temperature and wavelength, and it should be regularly monitored in order to ensure that the wavelength that is being generated, the light wavelength that is being generated by the laser source should not drift with respect to time and also with respect to temperature. With it should not drift there should not be any drift in the wavelength with respect to time and temperature into the spectral region of other adjacent sources. So that condition should also be taken care. It should also to be taken care before we actually achieve uh, the spacing between two different channels or multiple channels inside a network. Okay. So a more flexible implementation of such a device where it should be temperature controlled, it should be wavelength controlled, and there should not be any drift in the wavelength to the other spectral region. So all those things has to be monitored uh, continuously in order to achieve uh, multiplexing, or what you call it as, in order to achieve this dense WDM networking, right? The more flexible approach is going for a tunable laser. So this tunable laser stands for a single laser, and the output of that laser is going to be having multiple wavelengths. Okay, so if you can consider a laser source, the input to the laser source is a electric current, and the output of the laser source is a light. Okay, so the amount of electric current that you supply to the laser source will decide the wavelength that is uh, the output of the laser, wavelength of light that is outputted by the laser. Okay, is that able to understand? Whatever the current that you supply to the input of the laser source, so any light source that you take, it will accept electric current as the input, and it will produce a light as the output, right? So the amount of current that you apply to the laser source will decide what wavelength is being generated by that particular laser source. So here the tunable laser stands for such a device. It's a dynamic device where the input current is dynamically changed in order to achieve different wavelength signals at the output of the laser source. Okay. So the fundamental concept in making such a dynamic device is to change the cavity length in which the lasing occurs in order to have the device emitting different wavelengths. So please go through this important statement because I have already discussed a dynamic thin film filter in which the I mean the distance between the two reflecting surfaces, that is capital D, will decide which wavelength signal is being transmitted and which wavelength signal is being reflected. Almost the same concept is being used here in the construction of the laser source, where uh, the cavity length and the input current. So we have two parameters, the cavity length in the sense, the distance between the lasing cavity. So when you go with respect to the construction of the laser, you can find there will be a cavity, what we call it as a lasing cavity, in which the light will start coming out of that cavity. So if that cavity length is being dynamically increased or decreased, so that will result in different wavelength of light that can come out of the laser source. Okay, so input current and the cavity length will decide what wavelength will be generated by that laser source dynamically. So we have a single laser source, and that laser source can produce different wavelength signals or different wavelengths of light. So mathematically, how that is being achieved, you can see with frequency tunable lasers. Uh, with frequency tunable lasers, one needs only one source. As I was mentioning, we require only one laser source, but that laser source can only be used in order to generate different wavelength signals just by changing the cavity length and the input current that is supplied to the laser source or the light source. These devices are based on distributed feedback. DFB stands for distributed feedback, and DBR stands for distributed uh, distributed Bragg reflection, right? So there are two such laser devices. They have named as they are popular devices. They have named as DFB, distributed feedback laser devices, as well as distributed DBR. DBR stands for distributed Bragg reflecting laser sources. Okay, so these devices are frequency tunable devices, so that we can achieve multiple wavelengths that is coming out of either a DFB laser or a DBR laser. Is that clear? So how do we achieve this frequency tuning with respect to this DBR and DFB? It can be achieved by changing the input current. As I was mentioning, you can see altering the injection current into the active section. By altering the injection current, that is the input current for a laser source, we call it as an injection current. If you can alter the injection current, you can just alter the frequency of the tunable laser, so that it can produce different frequency or a different wavelength signal that is coming out of the device. It can also be achieved, this frequency tuning can also be achieved by changing the temperature. Okay, cavity length is one more option. Changing the temperature, altering the injection current, then cavity length, those are the parameters which are going to impact on the wavelength that is being produced, right? What is the tuning range? So we have a terminology called as a tuning range. Tuning range is if you consider a single laser source, from what wavelength to what other wavelength, what is the band of wavelength that the laser source is going to generate different wavelengths. Okay, so if you consider, for example, I can name the band as 1300 to 1350. Okay, so in that case, what will be the tuning range? 50 nanometer, 1300 nanometer to 1350 nanometer. So that will be the tuning range. So in that tuning range of 1300 to 1350, you can generate 1301, 1302, 1305, 1307, like that. You can generate different wavelength signals. So that will be the tuning range, 1300 to 1350, for example. So that is called as a tuning range, represented as delta lambda tune. So mathematically, it is expressed here as delta lambda tune is dependent on the effective refractive index. Delta n effective stands for change in the effective refractive index. So since again the laser source is also made up of a semiconductor material, and we basically use glass as a raw material, and we obviously know there will be a change in the refractive index if the doping is being changed. If the doping density is increased or decreased, that obviously will increase or decrease the refractive index. So here, N effective stands for the effective refractive index of that particular material which is used to construct the laser source. Delta N effective means a change in the refractive index, change in the effective refractive index. Okay, so ratio of delta lambda tune, that is the tuning range divided by the wavelength, is equal to ratio of change in the effective refractive index divided by the value of effective refractive index, right? Please concentrate on this diagram. On the y-axis we have amplitude, that is the amplitude of the light signal of different wavelength. On x-axis we have lambda. So whatever the peaks that you are observing here, those are the peaks of different wavelengths, and you can see delta lambda channel is nothing but the spacing between two adjacent wavelengths. Okay, delta lambda channel represents the spacing between any two adjacent channels or any two adjacent wavelength signals, right? And delta lambda signal represents the width of that particular wavelength or the channel. Okay, there are 4 to 5 terminologies you can see. As I mentioned, delta lambda tune is the range in which the light source can produce multiple wavelength signals. Okay, so from starting point to the end point, this is what we call it as delta lambda tune. So it can produce say 50 different or 100 different wavelength signals. For example, as I mentioned, 1300 to 1350. If delta lambda signal, that is the width of each light source, is say 1 nanometer, then it can accommodate up to say 50 different channels between 1300 to 1350. If each uh, delta lambda signal, that is the width of each signal, is constant, which is equal to 1 nanometer, so we can place 50 such different wavelengths, or we can tune the laser source to produce such 50 different wavelength signals. Okay, and uh, if you need to maintain some channel spacing between adjacent wavelengths, then it also requires some wavelength within that range. So in that case, it can be less than 50 different wavelengths. Okay, please go through the next important statement. In order to avoid the crosstalk or the interference between the adjacent channels, a channel spacing of 10 times the spectral width is being maintained, and it is being often specified with respect to a laser source, right? In order to avoid the crosstalk or the interference between the adjacent channels, the channel spacing delta lambda signal should be 10 times that of, delta lambda channel should be 10 times that of the source spectral width. So you can see delta lambda signal is the source spectral width, delta lambda channel is the spacing between multiple channels. Okay, so delta lambda channel should be 10 times that of delta lambda signal. Okay, so to proceed with this, what is the number, or what is the maximum number of channels, that is capital N, that can be placed within the tuning range? So this is the tuning range. How many channels with the spectral width of delta lambda signal and the spacing of delta lambda channel, with those constraints, how many such channels can be placed within the tuning range of 1300 to 1350. So that is defined by delta lambda tune. So N is going to decide that number of channels. N is approximately tuning range, that is delta lambda tune divided by delta lambda channel. This simple equation will tell us how many channels can be placed within a band of 1300 to 1350, whereas delta lambda channel is 10 times that of delta lambda signal. Okay, so with respect to the same equations of whatever we have gone through, that is delta lambda channel should be 10 times delta lambda signal. N is tuning range divided by the channel spacing. Let me take a small example. suppose the maximum refractive index change in a particular distributed feedback reflecting laser is operating at 1550 nanometer. That is nothing but lambda. 1550 nanometer is the lambda, that is wavelength. 0.65 is the tuning, sorry, refractive index change. Maximum refractive index change is 0.65%. That is what they mentioned. So what is the tuning range? Tuning range is delta lambda tune divided by lambda is equal to delta n effective by n effective. So that is the equation that we have heard here. So this equation is being used in order to get the value of delta lambda tune, because lambda is known as 1550 and delta n effective is given as 0.65%, right? So delta lambda tune is lambda into n effect, delta n effective divided by n effective. Delta is lambda is 1550 nanometer. Delta n effective by n effective, the entire ratio is given as 0.65%. Okay, they substitute that 0.65% means 0.65 divided by 100. That will give you 10 nanometer. Okay, so your delta lambda tune will be now 10 nanometer. Okay, can you see here? Delta lambda tune is 10 nanometer, which is lambda into the ratio of n delta n effective by n effective. And that is given in the statement as 0.65%. 0.65 into divided by 100 will give you 0.065, 0065, right? Next, uh, delta lambda signal is mentioned. If not in that statement, it is given as 0.02 nanometer. So that is the spectral width of a laser source for a particular channel. That is what we call it as source spectral width, 0.02 nanometer at 2 Gbps frequency or 2 Gbps operating range, right? We need to calculate number of channels that can be placed. So the number of channels that can be placed is given by the equation n is equal to delta lambda tune divided by delta lambda channel. So what will be delta lambda channel? Delta lambda channel is 10 times delta lambda signal. So delta lambda signal is 0.02 nanometer. Delta lambda channel is 10 into 0.02 nanometer. So that will be 0.2 nanometer. What is numerator? That is delta lambda tune. Delta lambda tune, we already know that it is 10 nanometer. So 10 nanometer divided by 10 into 0.02, that is 0.2 nanometer, will give you 50. N is equal to 50. So that means to say 50 different channels can be uh, produced by a laser source, which is operating at this wavelength 1550 nanometer. Okay, so n is equal to 50. So this is the value of n. 50 different wavelengths can be generated by that DBR, distributed Bragg reflecting laser, for a given wavelength and for a given parameter of delta n effective by n effective.
Sir, we have class now, sir, LT.
Yes.
I'm going to close now. Wireless class will start. So thank you all for attending. If you have any doubts, you can just post the questions on your Google Meet.